Welcome to the first ever episode of Crafts and Crimes. My name is Nika McLaughlin and I will be your host, your poltergeist host, at the risk of stealing things from other things. And I'm very excited to share this episode of Crafts and Crimes with you. So today you are going to be watching as this beautiful Thanksgiving-esque wreath gets made. If you're anything like me and you like a little bit of spooky, but you also like a little bit of glitter, this is the place for you. And while you're watching this wreath get made, you're also going to be learning about the tale of the Donner Party. Let's get into it. So if you're like me and you're from Nevada or Northern California, you've heard all about the Donner Party, maybe in school, maybe in passing, maybe you read a book about it. But there's a lot more to the story of the Donner Party than the big thing, which we all know is cannibalism. Yes, I'm going to share this story with some humor. If that's not your thing, you can skedaddle, because I gotta have some gotta have some comic relief in stories like this. The Donner Party was a group of people that came from Springfield, Illinois. Now, back in these times, which was around the 1840s, it was really popular for people to travel from the East Coast to the West Coast with the discovery of silver and gold and prosperity and excitement. So the Donner Party, which was a group of families, the Donners and the Reeds, traveled together from, again, that Springfield, Illinois area, headed towards California. So the first stop that they would have to make was in a place called Independence. Now, they had to plan well because it was well known that the Sierra Nevadas, that's where I'm from, the Sierra Nevadas had crazy winters. I just whacked this microphone. I am so sorry. They had crazy winters in the Sierra Nevadas, especially back then before people were living there. It was very hard to get through that area during that time. So you had to plan your Oregon Trail travels precisely so you could get through there before the snowfall and get yourself settled before it got wintry and cold and disgusting outside. The group left on April 15th of 1846. Yes, I'm looking at a timeline, okay? I've read a lot about this, but I can't always remember the points, okay? So they made it to Independence, Missouri, where they would spend the next 2 days plotting their trip, making sure that they can do everything on time. After this, they depart Independence, Missouri, and start heading for California. Lots would happen on this journey. I'm not going to go through every tiny little detail, but babies would be born. Now, I just had a baby myself, and I'm recovering from doing so. I cannot imagine doing that back then without epidural, let alone on the Oregon Trail. Okay, I could not, no. Couldn't imagine doing it. There comes a point where they are hanging out. I want to say it's like Kansas or in that area. There's a lot of corn. Okay, there's corn. It's all moving around. It's the middle of the night, and one of the guards that they have watching for Native Americans, or, because a lot of them believed that they could possibly be hostile. Anyway, his job was to watch to make sure everyone was safe, and he could see the corn moving in the night and thought they were under attack from Native Americans, and that ended up resulting in a fire, which was a whole big problem, scaring a bunch of the oxen. A lot of crazy things happened in this time. Now, one of the biggest things that would be the ultimate demise of the Donner Party would be the riding of the Hastings Cutoff. Now, the Hastings Cutoff was kind of a shortcut that went right through the Sierra Nevada mountains. If done in the right time, absolutely saved you a bunch of time. If done at the wrong time, as it would be done, it would mean chaos, absolute chaos for the Donner Party. Throughout August, they actually made really good time because of the Hastings Cutoff. Now, of course, we all know about the cannibalism that happens, but there were other deaths that happened along the way on these travels. One of the men's mother passed away, and then Luke Halloran died of tuberculosis, and he's buried in a coffin at a fork in the road the following day. Now, I want you to imagine you're traveling with your family, someone gets sick, passes away, you have to bury them essentially on the road. You don't ever get to go back and visit that grave. There's not really a funeral situation. I'm assuming since they had a coffin, they paid their respects and it was a sweet situation. But Imagine having to leave your loved one just on the road and you're never able to go visit their grave again, drop off flowers. It's not like having, someone cremated and turned into a necklace. You can't honor their body in that way. You have to just leave them there. Now, not only did they suffer later on in the winter, but they also suffered when it was too hot in the desert that they were traveling through. They ran out of water. The oxen that they had ran away. So the Reed family actually had to leave their covered wagons and just carry what they could on foot for the rest of the journey. In October, as they were headed out, some fights actually broke out between some of the people on the Donner Party. While struggling up a sandy hill at Iron Point, Nevada, the Reed and Graves teams become entangled. A fight breaks out between Milt Elliott, Reed's teamster, and John Snyder driving the Graves wagon. When Reed intervenes with a knife to cut the team, Snyder grows angrier and hits Reed on the head with a whip handle. The handle breaks into Reed's skull and causes bleeding. With Snyder about to strike again, Reed stabs him in the chest with his hunting knife. Snyder stumbles some feet up the hill and dies. Louis Kieseberg once suggested to hang Reed, but the immigrants decide just to banish him, who at first refuses to leave, but then later agrees. Reed heads west. The following day, he overtakes the Donners, who have moved ahead of the rest of the party. One of Reed's teamsters, Walter Heron, has been traveling with the Donners. He decides to accompany Reed to California, knowing that time is running out and the emigrants travel as quickly as possible along the Humboldt River. So they're kind of starting to panic now because they know it's October. And if you know anything about the Sierra Nevadas, it's very close to snowy season in October. Now, again, I'm just giving you a crash course here. A great source of information about the Donner Party is this book right here. I learned tons and tons and tons about the entirety of their journey. But we're gonna hit the part where they get to the snowy Nevada mountains now. So essentially what happens is because they took that cutoff, they ran late. And now they are getting stuck, headed uphill in a ton of snow. This is bad for the oxen. This is bad for the people. They find a point, they find a pass where they just can't go anymore. So they build cabins, they do their best to hunt for food. There's not much out there though because it's an insane winter. The snow that year got up to 20 feet high. So imagine trying to trudge through that much snow that's continuously falling. As they're dealing with this, they have a little bit of food. One of the things that they really traveled with was jerky. They have their oxen that they use for food. Sadly, they end up having to use their pets for food, and that's when the cannibalism starts. So they end up getting kind of stuck in this area where in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and they build cabins. They're doing their best to hunt. They're doing their best to eat the food that they have. However, slowly but surely, or maybe quickly, they run out. Now, it's really easy to judge these people for what they ended up having to do. But you have to remember, many of us do not know what it is like to face extreme emaciating hunger. And they're not just hungry. It's not just like, hangry. It's genuinely starving. They're exposed to the elements, which is also affecting their mental stability. And some of the things that we don't have in imagery is their clothes were the only things that they had. People maybe had like 2 dresses, 2 pairs of trousers. People didn't have a lot of clothing items back then. So what they were wearing was wearing down and falling apart. There's like writings of some of the women like with their chest exposed because their dresses just fell apart because it was, it was out in the elements. It's all they were wearing. When fabric rubs up against each other and friction happens, things begin to rip. So not only are they cold, but they're also having parts of their body exposed to this cold that wouldn't normally be that exposed to this cold, if that makes sense. So they had to resort to cannibalism. So as people died of natural causes, which could have been being sick from the cold, getting sick in general, or just dying, they would have to consume them to stay alive. Now, in the actual Donner Reed party, no one was murdered, except there were some Native American guides that did end up getting murdered and utilized for food, and that is horrific. I don't know why that choice was made. I know people did not view Native Americans as people back then. I don't know if that's why, if it was desperation. I don't know. It's not okay. It's not nice. It's yucky. This is a yucky piece of history. So they made it through that winter, surviving on basically eating their loved ones. Now, one thing that I have learned just through different pieces of research, they actually had to label different body parts. So that way, you know, a family member wouldn't accidentally eat their blood relative. So they tried to keep that kind of separated. And then it's funny, if you go to the Donner Museum today, it'll say there's no remains. Well, there's a reason there's not remains from these people. It all got consumed. So that's how they survived that winter, was simply by doing that, having fires to stay warm. And then eventually when the snow got low enough that they could trudge through it to the best of their abilities, a few members of the party actually left and went to get help. 10 men returned with provisions, and they were horrified with what they saw. The people were emaciated, they were starving, they were probably acting a little bit loony because of everything that they had to go through. So eventually the Donner Party did make it to where they were trying to go in California. And another thing that, you know, they don't really talk about when you learn about this in history is the aftermath, what they had to go through. The members of this party could never live down what they had to do. People would not want anything to do with them. They would think they were gross. They would think they were weird. And people would be very unkind to them because of that. So it's really interesting to learn about what happened in the aftermath. It really affected their lives forever. I imagine it'd be kind of like, you know, you make a huge mistake, everybody knows about it, and that's all you're really associated with. That's your name being held on to that. So my ghoulish friends, that is the quick tale of the Donner Party. There's a lot more to it. So much happened between actually leaving and getting where they were going. If you are interested in dark and creepy stuff like I am, and or just crafting, if you're mortified by what I'm talking about, you could always mute my words and just watch the pretty crafts. Look at the pretty Thanksgiving wreath. If that's more your thing, that's totally okay. But if you are into the dark and spooky and bleh, like I am, please hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and get ready for more. All right, I will see you next week for some more crafts and crime.